People, what was the boldest romantic advance that you ever made? Story 1. About 5 years ago, I was living in a shared house. Hadn't been there long. One day, as I was heading out, I spotted a new tenant moving in downstairs. My room was upstairs. She had a cute, green-dyed hair, and we caught each other's eye for a moment as I came down the stairs. No words were exchanged, and I just went on with my day. Later, when I got back, I thought about introducing myself but chickened out. Instead, I wrote her a note. "Hi, noticed you moving in earlier and wanted to say hello, but I was in a bit of a rush. Welcome. Here's my number, if you ever need anything." I slipped the note under her door, then headed back out for the evening with some friends. I came back that night around 10:30 p.m., totally forgetting that I'd left a handwritten note under someone's door like a total weirdo. When I opened my own door, I noticed a letter slipped under it. It said something like, "Hi, I remember you too. Thanks for making me feel welcome. Here's my number. Let's chat sometime." We started messaging that evening. Her name was Alex, a musical socialite, and it turned out we had some mutual friends. She invited me down to her place for a smoke and a proper introduction. I went, and it was cool discovering how much we had in common. Nothing more happened that night. I just headed back to my room. About 10 minutes later, she messaged me saying it was fun, and we should do it again. But I was feeling bold and a little daring, so I told her I was in my room without any clothes on, and she should come up and find out. She laughed and called me crazy. I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. I peeked through the peephole and, without hesitation, opened it to find her standing there, completely bare. She looked surprised but amused. She started to walk away but paused at the top of the stairs, glanced back with a grin, bit her lip and said, "Screw it. The rest, as they say, is history." Haven't done anything quite that wild since. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I was at a party when a girl came up to me and said, "Can you hold my beer?" I didn't know her, and we hadn't talked before, but I said, "Sure," and she handed me her beer. She took off her jacket, and I gave her beer back, like any normal person would. She said, "Thanks." I replied, "Can I hold your beer again?" "Why?" she asked. "Because every time I hold your beer, you take something off," I said. She looked at me and said, "Follow me." So I followed her upstairs, and we did it. I love holding other people's beers. Story 3. About 10 years ago, when I was 30, I worked as a shipwright through a temp agency at a shipyard that also had a large marina. One Wednesday morning during my second week, I headed over to the last boat on my repair list. I knocked on the door and a girl's voice called, "Come in." I stepped inside and there she was, Katya, a stunning 20-year-old. It was the middle of summer, blazing hot, and she was dressed for it, just a short skirt and a tiny top. She told me her parents were out visiting her aunt and uncle for the week and that I could just get on with whatever repairs I needed to do. As I worked, we started chatting, and I could tell she was into me. I liked her too, she was hilarious, but at that point, she was just the daughter of a client in my mind. While I was fixing things, I found myself sneaking glances at her, which she definitely noticed. She didn't seem to mind. In fact, she started teasing me a little, subtly showing off her stunning body while keeping up this innocent act. When lunchtime rolled around, I told her I'd be back in 30 minutes. She surprised me by saying she'd like it if I ate lunch with her on the boat. I practically sprinted to the shop, grabbed my lunch, and hurried back to her. Sitting down next to her, I started on my sandwich. She crossed her legs and accidentally pulled up her skirt, giving me a clear view, then smiled and said she didn't mind if I looked. She kept teasing me through the entire lunch break. When I finished eating and got back to work, she headed down the steps to the galley to grab a drink from the fridge. I was working just above her near the front windows when she bent over, casually pulled up her skirt, and flashed me her buns. She looked up at me with a look that clearly said, "All right, pay attention, this isn't for nothing." She grabbed her drink, returned to the saloon, and settled onto the couch. It was all still playful teasing. I could tell she wasn't expecting anything more, but that's when I decided, screw it. I'm going in. I moved the table in front of the couch out of the way, dropped to my knees and slid my right hand onto her stomach, gently pushing her back into the cushions. This wasn't what she expected. She startled, nervous, and asked, "What are you going to do to me?" I just told her to be quiet. Grabbing her thighs, I drew her closer until she was perched right on the edge of the couch. I just got hold of her pie and ate it like I've been hungry for months. Her reaction afterward was priceless. "Oh my God, that was incredible," she breathed, a huge smile spreading across her face. "And yeah, remember how I said her parents were gone for the rest of the week? Well, it was a 3-day job, and while the rest of the shipwrights were busy working in the shop, no one checked in on me. Over the next 2 days, I devoured her pie several more times, and she clearly loved it. A couple of weeks later, I found out she was only 18, a bit young maybe, but honestly, I didn't care." Story 4. Probably not my boldest one, but the most recent one that I can remember. So, I crashed my car. Total wreck. Honestly, it's a miracle I even survived, let alone managed to crawl out and stand by the road. My phone was lost in the chaos, so I started waving down cars hoping someone would stop and call for help. Someone finally pulls over. They lay me down and insist I keep my neck still just in case, until the ambulance arrives. Paramedics show up, strap a brace around my neck, load me into the ambulance, and give me a hefty dose of morphine. Next thing I know, I'm cracking jokes and laughing all the way to the ER, high as a kite but alive. I get to the ER and they immediately cut off my shirt and pants, reap to my favorite t-shirt before checking me over and sending me off for x-rays. I'm freezing, barely clothed, and high as a kite on morphine. I get wheeled into the x-ray room, and who greets me? 2 young, attractive women. Now, even in my dazed state, the part of me that's a shameless flirt when sober just had to make an appearance. So, there I am, barely dressed, slightly shivering, completely stoned, and still trying to turn on the charm. They lift me onto that cold metal table that slides into the x-ray machine, and it's freezing. I'm only in my underwear, so I joke, "Just a heads up, if this machine can see through my boxers, it's really cold in here and this isn't a fair representation of its usual size." Both of them burst out laughing. One manages to say between giggles, "Doesn't matter what you're wearing, we'd still see everything." Feeling bold, or maybe it was just the morphine, I ask if I can get both of their numbers. Surprisingly, they each scribble their digits on a piece of paper and tell me, "Call us when you get a new phone." Story 5. A big group of college friends were on a trip, all staying at the same hotel. They came up to my room for drinks, games, and general silliness. Everyone, myself included, got pretty wasted. One girl, in particular, accidentally sent a message saying, "I want some vitamin D" to a group text, instead of just the person she meant it for. I wasn't even in that group chat, so in my drunken brain, I felt kinda left out. The other friends, who had smoked weed earlier and weren't as drunk, went out to grab some food. The girl stayed behind, and since it was my room, I didn't go anywhere either. She kept saying, "I want some D, but where am I gonna get it from?" Meanwhile, my little guy was excited AF. When she leaned over to look out the window trying to spot the others heading to Denny's or wherever, I quietly came up behind her and pressed myself against her. "I didn't get that text, but if you're looking, I might have what you want. If not, I'll stop and go to bed." "Should I stop?" She hesitated for a moment, then said no, closed the blinds, and gave me a blowy. It was a strange moment for me, normally pretty quiet and a virgin until then. I didn't actually did it with her that night, because I'd never gotten blowy before either. After I was done, I couldn't get it up again fast enough, so I just ate her pie and helped her reach the finish line a couple of times. I didn't lose my V-card properly until the next day when she came back for round 2. Totally sober. Story 6. My better half doesn't Reddit, so I'll answer for him. We'll call him Mike, since that's his name. A bit of backstory though. We grew up together. I've known him since we were about 8. We both crushed on the other a bit throughout high school, but the timing never worked out. When one of us was single, the other was taken. We graduated, lost touch, you know how it goes. I married a guy. Eventually it came out that he was having an affair, so I packed my stuff, left, and changed my relationship status to single before hitting the road to meet a friend for a much-needed drink. As I'm nursing my stupid cocktail in abject misery, my phone rang. It was Mike. "Really? Haven't seen except in passing for 10 years, Mike?" "That Mike?" I answered it, and he asked where I'm at. I relay my location, To which he replied that my taste in bars is terrible, but he'll be there in 15 minutes. Exactly 15 minutes later, he walks in the door and spots me at the bar. He walks over and I go to give him the long-lost friend hug, along with a "Wow, how are you?" Instead, he grabs me by the ponytail, pulls my head back, and kisses me passionately until I couldn't breathe. When he finally lets me go, he says, "Order me a Blue Moon, dear. 2 oranges," then slaps my buns and goes to the bathroom. That was 5 years ago. We've been together ever since, and our first child is due in May. I'll swear it on a 10-foot-tall stack of Bibles. It happened exactly like that. The non-Cliff Notes version leading up to this event is actually much harder to believe. It involves a terminal illness and a double lung transplant prior to the affair. Post-affair, it involves the death of the ex-spouse before the divorce could be finalized and an honest-to-God invite on Judge Judy. I wish I was kidding. Story 7. Not bold, but pretty funny. I met this girl at a bar once while I was in another city. I got her number right as the lights came on, those harsh, guggly lights, which made the whole thing feel super awkward. I asked if she wanted to come to Denny's for a late-night breakfast. She said no, but I sent her a picture of the food anyway. Turns out she's a health nut and thought it looked disgusting. Oh well, pretty typical response. Didn't expect anything to come of it anyway. Fast forward about 3 months. I was back in her city on a Thursday-Friday. We'd been loosely keeping in touch, just casual small talk and pretty tame texting. The night before, I'd gone out drinking and woke up still half drunk. In that state of hungover brilliance, I texted her saying she should ditch work at lunch, bring me pizza, and I'd return the favor by eating her pie for dessert. To my complete surprise, she actually showed up with a slice of pizza in hand and told me she nearly fell out of her chair laughing when she got my message. True to my word, I devoured her pie for a solid 40 minutes. Afterward, I told her she should probably head back to work. It was getting late. She was still lying there, a mess, moaning, "Just bang me already," while I was trying to help her back into her jeans. I eventually got her up and playfully pushed her out the door at 1 p.m., locking it behind her because, well, that kind of chaotic energy just cracks me up when I'm drunk. Then I crawled back into bed and demolished the pizza. Honestly, it was almost as good as the rest of the afternoon. Story 8. Over spring break last year, I was drinking with some friends, and by the end of the night, it was just 3 of us still awake. Me, a guy, another guy I had a bit of a crush on, and a girl I'd been flirting with. We started playing Never Have I Ever, and the conversation drifted toward 3 scores. The girl mentioned she'd only ever had one with another girl and a guy, but never with 2 guys, and said it was a shame she hadn't. The other guy and I both said, purely hypothetically of course, that we'd be down, if it were the right people. So naturally, we all just went to sleep. The next morning, I was sitting alone with the girl and just blurted out, "So last night with all that talk about 3 scores, if other guy is down, would you actually want to do that?" She smiled and nodded. "Yeah, I said I'm totally down, but I said I'm leaving today." I shrugged. "I still talk to him tonight, since we said we're sharing a room by chance, and if he's on board, maybe we can do it back at school." That night, lying in bed, I decided to bring it up. "So, last night we were talking about 3 scores, I started, and how the 3 of us all want to do one with 2 guys. I talked to girl about it this morning. Would you want to when we get back to school?" He looked at me and said simply, "Yeah." Feeling pretty ballsy, I pushed further. "And what about without girl?" He hesitated for a moment, then answered, "Sure." I smirked. "How about now?" Without missing a beat, he said, "Uh-huh." So, we did. The 3 score didn't end up happening due to other factors, but I dated the guy for a while and am now seeing the girl, so I got to pound both of them anyway. Just separately. Story 9. At a Halloween party at a brewery, I was dressed as the L piece from Tetris. Outside, under the heat lamps, a smoking hot girl from the group next to us tapped me on the shoulder and asked if I had a lighter. I was already pretty buzzed, so I grabbed the cigarette, reached up to the giant space heater to light it, and then passed it over. About 15 seconds pass, then I turn, lean in, and say, "Just putting this out there, I'm pretty prolific at eating pies." "You know what kind of pies?" She looks a bit put off at first, then pauses and says, "BS. Guys say stuff like that all the time. What makes you different?" So I dive into the details, talking about adjusting pressure, timing, all that, and before we know it, we're having a 10-minute conversation about eating pies. Then her friends show up, ready to hit the dance floor. I say peace, and they leave. My buddy turns to me, totally losing it. How can you talk about that for 10 minutes? And then just let her walk away? I just shrug and say, you gotta let her percolate. And it's only 11 p.m. Later on, we run into each other again. The conversation's awkward, talking about life and stuff. But neither of us is really feeling it. I ask for her number for later, and she hits me with the classic, you give me yours instead. I just brush it off and peace out again. Around 1 a.m., we cross paths again. She asks why I blew her off. I told her she blew me off first, and honestly, I don't have time for that. I lean in close, right by her ear, and say, I want to kiss you right now. She leans back and shoots me a come-hither look. I go in like a kid in a candy store. We start making out right there in the club. Meanwhile, my dong is shredding the thick cardboard that makes up 99% of my ghetto costume. Basically 2 boxes, some green paint, and electrical tape. It didn't look great, but it worked. I step back, rip the damn box off me, and move in closer. I whisper in her ear, I want to take you home and make good on that claim I made earlier about being pretty damn good at pleasure. She responds, one condition, after tonight, no breakfast, no pretending we're dating. Let's just enjoy the night and then never see each other again. I kicked the discarded box to the corner, the costume, and dove back in. We were about to leave, but she had to take her friend and some random guy back to her apartment first, so we could keep things going there. We ended up spending a damn hour hunting down the most garlicky mac and cheese at a restaurant before anything actually happened. What the hell? I thought it was over. She was pacing. The night felt dead. Then it got weird. It turned into a double date. In costumes. At 3 a.m. What even? I just wanted to get down to business. I'm not a one-nighter. I'm the nerdy kid with Goku hair, for crying out loud. Eventually, we ditched the random guys and headed to her place. And yes, hell yeah. Until we realized neither of us had protection. So, yeah, apparently neither of us really knows how to one-night stand. We just ended up with the most frustratingly blue-ballsy night ever. The kicker? She didn't even want the pie eaten. Go figure. But damn, it was still a hell of a night. Shout out to Steam Whistle Brewery. Story 10. This one's not about me, but it's so bold, I just have to share. The award goes to my ex-girlfriend's brother. They're only a couple years apart, and she and I ended up together years later before recently splitting. But throughout it all, he and I would hang out like none of that even mattered. Anyway, the guy has an astronomical love for strip clubs. He'd call or just show up out of nowhere, basically demanding we hit the bar. It didn't take much convincing on my part, but it was clearly his thing, and it was easy to see why. His go-to pickup lines were simple but effective. He set spot a dancer he thought was hot, tip her big on stage, and ask her to come over to our table. When she showed up, it was always the same line. Hey, I've got a huge dong, wanna sit in my lap? Sometimes it was met with mild disgust, but more often it got giggles as the dancers tried to humor him. But more than once, he'd buy a dance, and the moment she sat in his lap, they'd completely lose it. Turns out the guys hung like a horse, so absurdly big it's almost unbelievable. I know this because we go way back to the days when you end up sharing partners and witnessing some wild stuff as teenagers. I didn't need anyone to tell me, everyone knew, and so did all our friends. That was his claim to fame, and he took any chance he got to whip it out. Another go-to line he set use with dancers around here, especially after they found out he was packing Magnum, was, I've got a bottle of Xanax, want a party? Or what? And honestly, it worked more often than not. I've spent plenty of nights sitting solo in dance clubs while he was busy banging the dancers in the parking lot. Greasy? Hell yeah. But it was the truth, and it worked for him. No surprise though, the guy's 33 now and hasn't had a relationship last longer than 8 months ever. He doesn't seem bothered by it though, so maybe I'm the one missing out. Story 11. I was riding Amtrak from DC to Atlanta, in one of those cars with little compartments that seat 6 or 7 people. I had just gotten settled into one of them, completely to myself. The plan was to get off in Charlotte and spend a day visiting family. When the ticket guy came by, I asked if he could give me a heads up as we got close to Charlotte, just in case I dozed off. He said sure, stamped the first leg of my ticket, and shuffled off down the aisle. I settled in and began to watch the passing countryside. Pretty soon the door opens and in walks a sweet-looking 20-something blonde. I'm in my early 30s at this point and not looking too bad myself. We politely greeted each other and returned to our respective iPods. Yep, you read that right. As the miles passed, we began to chat. We found similar interest in movies, music, etc. Somehow we uncovered that she'd never seen Pulp Fiction, a movie which I happened to have on my iPod. Lucky me. Since we were generally comfortable with each other and it seemed like we had the car to ourselves, we decided to watch the movie. She snuggled up to me and we put on PF on the 4.5-inch screen, sharing the earbuds. As stories like this tend to go, we soon found ourselves lost in a comfortable embrace, which led to a very gentle kiss. This kiss was so tender and sweet that I was content to just be in that moment for as long as possible. I am not a pushy guy, at all. My sexual MO has been and will always be to let things happen organically, never push the issue. I'd rather get purple balls than make a woman feel uncomfortable. We continued to kiss and lightly caress each other's arms, neck, face, etc. I can usually read little mannerisms and nothing was indicating intent from her to do much else, which was just fine. Then, with literally no other prompting, and to this day, I don't know what possessed me to do it, I gently but deftly shifted her hand to the front of my jeans. Her fingers magnetically wrapped around, and I felt all the breath leave her lungs through her lips, which had just disengaged mine. An instant later I felt her entire body shudder in my arms. At the same time her grip tightened as she began to slowly give me a HJ. With this her kiss returned to my lips. Now instead of a playful respect-inducing sweetness, there was an almost desperate undulating intensity to her lips and tongue. Her hand found mine, and the moment shifted, something deeper, more electric. Her breath caught as we moved together in sync. The air charged between us. Our kisses grew more urgent, more telling, as if every movement said the things we hadn't dared to voice. I traced the curve of her back, the softness of her waist, her body leaning closer with a silent kind of hunger. She climbed into my lap, her skirt brushing against my legs, her hands running through my hair, guiding me closer. There was no hesitation now, just that quiet, magnetic pull. Her movements were deliberate, slow but intense, like we both knew this moment had been building from the second we met. Every heartbeat, every breath, felt like it echoed through the narrow space between us. I felt her hips begin to sink lower toward mine, and as I was about to do my thing, the door to the compartment swung open, and the ticket collector said, "Wake up, bud, 10 minutes to Charlotte's." Story 12. I banged my friend's sister at a wedding with all of his friends present, then the maid of honor after full disclosure of previous bangage. I took a friend to a wedding, someone I'd met through her brother while we were all working together. We'd hooked up a few times before, but only a handful of close friends knew. The wedding was a blast. We drank, danced, and partied hard into the night. After the reception, everyone headed back to the hotel. The bride and groom were hosting an after-party in their suite and had invited everyone to join. Back at the room, she and I had a little private time. Then afterward she said she wasn't feeling great and planned to call it a night. She told me I should go ahead and join the others while she stayed in to rest. "All right, cool. I'll go have a few and come back," I told her. So, I head to the after-party, everyone's having a great time, and I end up hanging out with the bridal party just chatting and laughing. Then someone suddenly goes, "Wait. Why did it take you like 45 minutes to get here? You didn't even change clothes?" There was a long pause. Then it hits them. "Oh crap, you were hooking up with his sister." Another long pause. The groom looks at me and asks, "Were you?" I shrug and admit, "Yeah, I was." Cue a round of high fives from the guys and a classic eye roll from the bride. Fast forward about 30 minutes, and I find myself with the maid of honor sitting in my lap, clearly flirting. The bride walks over and blurts out, "He just hooked up with his date." The maid of honor looks at me and asks, "Did you?" I nod. "Yeah, I did." "She your girlfriend?" "Nope, just a friend." She shrugs. All right then. and goes right back to flirting. Things get a little hazy after that. I was probably closing in on a 24-pack for the day, but as the party wraps up and we set her all heading out, I vaguely remember this exchange. "Is she still in your room?" "Yeah." "All right, then I guess we start using mine." Next morning, I wake up completely confused about where I am, scramble back to my room, and piece together a halfway decent cover story on the fly. So, I quit college for a while, then came back a couple years later to visit my old friends. I was kind of a late bloomer and was really enjoying this new boost of confidence. One of the guys who used to feel totally out of my league was actually flirting with me, which was pretty fun. He introduced me to his older brother at the bar and then went off to handle something. The older brother was hot, kind of reminded me of Matthew Fox. He was polite, and we chatted for a bit. Then someone sent him a shot, and he groaned. "Ooh, my buddy sent me rumplemints. I hate rumplemints." I reached over, grabbed the shot, and downed it. "Want to get out of here?" He blinked, clearly surprised. "Yeah? Let's go for a walk." Before I knew it, I was giving him a blowy right there on the big main campus lawn, one of my favorite spots. He seemed pretty pleased about it. He got a text from his brother, and we went to grab a ride back to his place. The younger brother picked us up, but almost immediately got pulled over for driving without his lights on, and then got arrested for a DUI. We took a cab to their parents' house, only to realize he didn't have his keys since he was just visiting. And the parents weren't home, so we ended up fooling around in the grass out back. No protection, and he joked that his younger brother probably had some. We found other ways to entertain ourselves while waiting long enough for the cops to drop off the younger brother. Once he was back, we cleaned ourselves up and went inside. As I sat there listening to Younger's story of trouble and looming fines, I realized I just couldn't do it. I couldn't be the one to add to his night by having Older ask him for a protection so he could hook up with the girl he'd been chasing, the one with leaves in her hair, right after getting a DUI. So I said my goodbyes and called a cab. I know this is buried, but I've always liked this story. Rob, you were the best time. I never actually got laid, and despite what I might have let you believe, I never really did stuff like that. I was just having fun because I knew I'd never see you again. Thank God I came of age before camera phones. Story 13. I was at a house party with friends and friends of friends. There was a younger guy there who I'd known for a few years from him living in the area and us knowing some of the same people. Very nice guy, patient, complimentary, easy to be around. He was very shy about himself though, especially in groups, and didn't seem to think much of himself, but a gentleman if you got to know him one-on-one. I liked who he was for years, but generally had seen him as kind of like a younger brother. We were both over 18 though, but mostly as a nice guy who would make a lady happy one day. Except he was also a forever alone virgin guy. Anywho, a bunch of us were drinking and talking all night, just bouncing between random topics. At one point, the conversation shifted to intimacy and corn. The cute younger guy casually mentioned how hot he thought eating a girl's pie looked, and I agreed, but added that yeah, it's sexy, but it often looks super fake in corn. Like they rarely show it being done with the kind of technique you'd actually use in real life. Cute young guy accepted my wisdom with nods, but when I looked at him, I could also see signs on his face of inwardly cursing himself for potentially looking like a know-nothing idiot about intimacy in the group. I was one of the few girls there, and the only one engaging in this group convo, so I was littered with questions like, "So do you like your jugs being played while doing it?" by the other guys. Conversations followed this general pattern in some way. People never seemed to dislike him, but without a strong or commanding presence, he just had a way of fading into the background over time. Fast forward, really late, the people still there decided to head out cruising for places to go to for the rest of the night together. I was at the feeling happy, feeling sexy level of drunk while getting ready. I peeled away from others leaving to go say goodbye to cute young guy before I joined them, since he'd gone away to his bedroom at some point to play video games and maybe just be in his own headspace. I asked if he was okay alone in the dark there. He gave a shaky but sunnily diplomatic "yeah." He turned his face to make eye contact with me while talking for a moment and said it was great to see me again, and how nice it always is, with a smile. Really, genuinely. Then he apologizes, saying if he made me uncomfortable or if he seemed too much like a dork. talking about what he had said earlier. I tell him he's completely fine. He stammers a bit, half accepting this, half explaining that he just worries sometimes. He hoped I was going to have a nice night though. The little details I liked about him reassured me, and something inside me felt scholastic about his fears. I walked over to the bed he was sitting on, held my hands out while standing slightly in front of him and asked to borrow his. I take his hands and put them to my hips, with some fingertips tucked into the top of my skirt. Then I smiled gently and said, "Pull your hands downward." Cute young guy slowly drags them down my hips and legs. In a moment I was looking at him silently, with a facial expression like an art student seeing a Monet work in real life. He looked up at my face and I asked, "Would you like me to stay here tonight and teach you how to eat the pie?" Y'all can guess what happened next. Story 14. I was at a party, and as someone who's pretty quiet, I usually keep to myself unless I'm around people I actually know. It's not that I'm awkward, I just don't like talking unless there's a reason to. Then this girl shows up. Someone I've known for years but never actually asked out. She heads out to the back porch where I happen to be, and we start talking. Before long, it's just the two of us out there, caught up in conversation. She starts telling me about this new tattoo she got on the right side of her ribcage, just under her boob, and it was some Lion King crap, typical white girl thing. Without even thinking, I blurt out, "Wait, you said are gonna hype up the tattoo and not show me?" She's wearing a dress, so the only real way to show it is to lift the whole thing up, and the second I realize what I just said, I get hit with this wave of embarrassment. I immediately go, "Oh crap, I am sorry." She pauses for just a second, then bam, dress all the way up, full-on major boobage on display. I internally fist bump whatever part of my brain thought to spit that crap out. No fear of rejection at that point. She had just thrown me the clearest signal ever, so I went for it. We dipped out and banged in the back of my beat-up old crappy Yoda, and never again have I ever made a swoop nearly as clean. Story 15. I was living in a hostel, which, honestly, is how most of my best stories start, when I took a fancy to this French girl who was staying with us for a few weeks. We had communal showers, and I was waiting for a stall to open up. Just as she finished and stepped out, I was walking past her on my way in, and she gave me this smile that I can only describe as distinctly French. I asked her if she wanted to join me in the shower, but obviously she didn't understand what I was saying since I don't speak French and she didn't speak any of the languages I knew. So, I repeated myself in Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian. Luckily, her friend in the next stall translated for her. She blushed and walked out of the bathroom. 2 minutes later, there was a knock on the shower door. It turned out to be a pretty fun few weeks. Story 16. I met a girl online back in August 2015. After chatting for a while, we decided to meet up at a local pool hall bar. When she showed up, I was stunned. She was stunningly beautiful, wearing a tight short skirt, a spaghetti strap top, and dressy flip-flops. I was completely blown away. That night, we literally bumped into another couple playing pool at the next table, so I bought them a drink too. Every time my date went to get a drink, I caught her stealing glances at me across the bar. By the end of the night, I was totally turned on and completely into her. It was really late, and we were both pretty drunk, so we walked over to my truck and talked for a while. I made my move, leaning in for a kiss. She kissed me back hesitantly, clearly a bit shy. For about 20 minutes, we danced around each other awkwardly until I started to touch her. After a moment, she lightly pulled away, but I grabbed hold of her inners and with one firm tug, ripped them off. I pulled her on top of me, and we banged right there in the parking lot where we'd met. It worked. We started dating, and after more than a year and a half, we're moving in together next weekend. The banging is still insanely hot, and she still calls me PR, Panty Ripper, when she's feeling playful. I love her more than I ever thought possible, and I feel so lucky to have her in my life. I still can't believe I made that move, that it actually worked, and that after all this time, we're still going strong. Here's to long live PR. Story 17. I had to get leg surgery, so while I was out getting cut up, this girl kind of on the edge of our friend group also happened to break her leg. So now I'm hobbling around on crutches, and she's hobbling around on crutches. Our eyes meet, and I said something like, "Want to find out if two people with two legs can bang?" She said yes. And the answer is, No, unless you have something to hold one of you up. Story 18. My boss was one of those stunning, confident women, the kind you describe as a total MILF. She had a naturally flirty personality, and we'd toss playful pickup lines back and forth now and then, nothing serious, just fun. Anyway, we both got sent to a work event in Vegas. It was supposed to be a group thing, company paid, nice hotel, the works. But as the date got closer, people started dropping out. Someone quit, someone else got in an accident, and it ended up just being me and her. So, day one in Vegas, we get absolutely hammered. We're dancing, laughing, kinda hanging off each other, but in my mind, it's all just harmless fun. At least, that's what I thought. Somehow, we make our way back to the hotel. At her door, she turns to me and says, "I hope you have a good night." Drunk me, full of confidence and zero filter, goes, "Oh, I think I will. Gonna solo myself off thinking of you." I immediately regretted saying it, but instead of being weirded out, she smirked and said, "You should come inside. I still give you a tour." Let's just say, we did things to each other in that room that still live rent-free in my head. My love for eating was also born that night. It could have gone pretty bad, but the stars lined up for me at that moment. Please don't try to hit on your boss though. There's a very good chance it won't go well. Story 19. A girl from school messaged me out of the blue on Facebook and asked if I wanted to hang out. We ended up meeting at a bar, and it was pretty clear she was flirting with me. At one point, she brought up about Korn and asked if I ever watched it with a girl before. I said no, and she smiled and said, "You should." So, I leaned in and whispered, "Let's go to your place, watch some Korn, and see where the night takes us." She looked at me, smiled, and said, "Okay." We went back to her place, and things quickly took a turn. She was a terrible kisser, super erratic, and just all over the place. There was no rhythm, no chemistry. It felt more awkward than anything else, and honestly, it totally killed the vibe. I didn't stick around long. We never talked again after that. Story 20. I've always been pretty fond of giving blowies, and naturally, I've been curious what they actually feel like to receive. So, last year in college, I asked this older classmate who'd been low-key flirting with me all semester what a BJ felt like. He gave me some bland, generic answer. Total letdown. So, I took a breath and said, "If I blow your flute after class, would you give me a real answer?" Next thing I know, he gave me a taste of his smoothie and almost gave me a speech about it. Story 21. I'm not very outgoing. Anyone I have been with, I usually have known for longer than a night. This was one of the very few instances where me getting out of my comfort zone paid off. I went to New Orleans for H4H for a week with other college students. We were being housed in a parish that was about 3 blocks away from a downtown area, so after we were done building on houses, we would go out and get effed up. One day during the week, we all got to go to the French Quarter for the day to do whatever. Me and some friends went to a bar and grill to grab some food to help soak up all the alcohol that would be entering our system that day. The bartender that sat us was incredibly gorgeous. About 5'3", 100 pounds, soaking wet and perky both in personality and chest. We flirted a little bit throughout the meal, and then I went to get everyone drinks. As we paid and we headed out on the town, I thought, what the hell, I'm only here for the week, and so I went up to her and asked her, "When do you get done tonight?" 8:30, if no one calls in, she said. "I'm only in town for the night, and I'd love to see you after work. I'd especially love to bang you." At this point, I'm sweating bullets, and not just because it's New Orleans at 95 degrees. I thought for sure I'd either get laughed at or smacked in the mouth. Bless her soul, she didn't skip a beat. Definitely, come by and walk me home. To say she was a freak in the sheets would be an appropriate description. By far the ballsiest I've ever been in picking someone up, and definitely the only time it's ever worked out so well. Story 22. I noticed this really hot guy checking me out at the bar one night, so I walked right up, introduced myself, and asked if he had a condom. He said he did. So, I asked, "Want to take me back to your place and use it?" He was definitely down. We kept seeing each other for about a month before mutually deciding to just be friends. He was a cool dude. Story 23. Back then, I messed up and took a lot of drugs, and wound up having to take a math class in summer school to even keep me on track to graduate. It was me and a bunch of other lowlifes, schlepping our bum to school during the mother-fixing summer to do math. One day after class, a girl I had never spoken to in all my years in middle and high school asked if I could give her a ride home. I thought I was a real bad boy, so I said sure, then we can smoke a bowl and bang, without even missing a beat. She said okay. It was at this point I realized I was a big fat wuss, because my heart started beating out of my chest, and my palms got sweaty, just at the prospect that she might be serious and I was about to get laid. I drove her home, and when we walked in, her parents were on the couch and the whole house reeked of cat piss and weed. We went to her garage and sat on a couch. Yeah, it was couch in the garage level of white trash. She said she didn't have any weed. The primary breadwinners of the household sitting in the living room watching Rugrats must have smoked it all, but that her older brother had a bottle of GHB in his room. We drank a couple caps of GHB and started making out until I got hit with a wave of nausea like those old videos of the devastating effects of a nuclear bomb and started emphatically vomiting in her driveway. Her father came out and said, "If he dies, he ain't dying here." I called my mom to come pick me up and told her that I ate bad chicken from Wendy's and was too sick to drive home, then went home and went into a G-hole and slept for 22 hours. I never did bang that girl, but she did pull her jugs out and gave me a hand. Jay on a lifeguard, stand down at the beach. A year later, we both graduated on time. Story 24. Back in college, I used to hang out with this friend of mine a lot. One night, we were at his basement rental, getting ready to go out. He said he was gonna hop in the shower real quick. I thought about joining him but figured that might be a little too forward, so I waited until he stepped out, then casually took my shirt off. He paused, looked at me and said, "I was kinda hoping you said join me in there." Next thing you know, I'm giving him a blowy and tit-banging. Fast forward, we've been together for a decade now. Story 25. Being 18 and still a student, I had a girlfriend whose friend from back home came to visit while my girlfriend was out celebrating her 19th birthday. The moment we met, there was an instant connection. I could tell she was into me. She was the petite brunette yin to my buxom blonde girlfriend's yang. The night ended with the two of them drunkenly messing around on the dance floor, laughing and flirting in that playful lipstick lesbian way. Sensing the moment, I slipped an arm around each of them, pulled them close, and said, "Dead serious. How about we take this back to yours and do it properly?" To my surprise, they both said yes. Absolute jackpot. Funny enough, the second boldest moment happened that same night. Out of a possessive streak, my girlfriend had insisted to use her mouth to mark the end of our three-way. Afterward, I took a quick shower, made myself a sandwich, and came back to find her fast asleep, snoring even while her friend was still wide awake. All it took was a quiet, "I wasn't done with you," and she climbed on, right there on the floor beside the bed. Story 26. I was pretty wasted at my friend's apartment complex and decided to take his dog, Misty, or something like that, for a walk. As I passed a girl heading into her place just a few doors down, she said something about how cute the dog was. She was maybe a 6 or 7 out of 10, though I was definitely drunk, so take that with a grain of salt. I go, "This is Misty, here, watch this," and start asking the dog to do tricks, having no idea if she actually knew any. But when I said, "Misty, sit," she sat. Then I tried, "Misty, shake a paw," just rolling with it. Then Misty actually shook my hand. I was genuinely impressed at how well-trained she was, but I played it cool. This girl didn't know she wasn't my dog. So I went with it and said, "Misty, lay down." And sure enough, she laid down like a champ. The girl giggled, clearly entertained. I was pretty drunk, so I just went for it. Yeah, she's a pretty cool dog. Anyway, my girlfriend just broke up with me. You want to go bang right now? She looked surprised, understandably, but then kind of smiled and said, sure. I walked Misty back to my buddy's place, gave her a pat, and said, "Good girl, I owe you one." 5 minutes later, I was at that girl's place, and we were doing it on her couch, eventually moving to the floor. It went on for a solid half hour before I got tired, made my way back, and passed out on my friend's couch next to Misty. Good times. She really was a great dog. Story 27. I was at a bar in New York with a friend, celebrating our own version of single girls' Valentine's Day. Our server was cute and kept finding reasons to come over and chat, fueled by a mix of liquid courage and that I really don't care energy. I turned to him and said, "So what time are we leaving?" He said 2 a.m. And we did, then spent the rest of the weekend together. Also, the first time I went out after leaving my husband, I wasn't feeling my best. Definitely not desirable. I hit a bar with my girlfriends, just trying to shake it off. Then I locked eyes with a guy who honestly wasn't exactly a head-turner. I walked straight up to him and said, "If we leave in the next 15 minutes, I'll go home with you." We were out the door in 5. Story 28. We are a young married couple. I bought the wildest, sluttiest stripper heels I could find. My husband was coming home from work, so I made a fancy dinner to surprise him. There I was in the kitchen, completely bare except for those heels, flawless makeup, hair tied up in a neat bun, holding his plate in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. I had him sit on the couch to enjoy his meal while I sipped my wine, and then, well, he couldn't keep his hands off me. Story 29. It was at the local watering hole. Decent place, not upscale, but not hole-in-wall either. In walks gorgeous late 40s or early 50s. Cougar. She wasn't overdoing it, just using Cougar as a reference point for her overall age versus mine. I'm 36. She had a confidence and a calm, collected ambiance about her that really attracted me. Her physical attributes were impeccable as well. On a normal day, I'm not a bad-looking guy, not in bad shape, and no severe social anxieties. I'm also not Brad Pitt, nor currently in a band, and was with my ex for 18 years, so I'm not the shoot from the hip or dong really kinda guy when I first meet someone who is attractive. She sauntered up to the bar stool next to mine, and I have no idea what made me say as the first thing out of my mouth, "Take me to bed or lose me forever." It was the 15% ABV stuff I was drinking, and a split second later as I was thinking, that might be the lamest line I've ever heard. She asks, "How old are you?" I'm not sure if I was shocked or thrilled that she responded to such a dumb line, but somehow I managed to retort, "Old enough to know better, young enough not to care." She says to the bartender, "Put my drink on his tab," then turns to me and tells me to meet her at her apartment right down the street in 10 minutes. So, I went to her apartment and knock on the door. Nothing but a stunning example of a half-century of taking care of yourself and a bottle of wine. That was a great night. I don't know how bold the actual line was, but for me and my personality, any line right away like that is pretty bold. Story 30. I was hanging out with a female friend I'd been flirty with for a while, but the timing had never worked out. One of us was always in a relationship. This time, though, we were both single. We'd always been drinking buddies, so we hit up a bar, got a little dressed up, and ended up getting pretty drunk. On the dance floor, things got a little heated. We were dancing pretty close. We headed back to my place afterward, which had always been the plan since she was staying over. She lived in another city and was crashing on my couch. But when we got there, we sat on my bed, and she looked at me and said, "Well, I sepp not sleepy. What do you want to do?" So, I leaned in and kissed her, and I said'll let your imagination fill in the rest. Story 31. Telling a girl she smelled bad. I used to live in a pretty hipster part of Baltimore. One night, I was sitting at my usual bar when a girl with dreadlocks sat down next to me. She wasn't bad looking, but honestly, she didn't seem to use deodorant. We started talking, and without thinking, I just blurted out that she smelled like B.O. I was annoyed. Like, how do you just assume everyone wants to smell your unshaven armpits? So yeah, I told her straight up. Somehow, that led to me banging her in a dirty back alley without a protection a short time later. Life is strange. Oh, and this was my answer when someone asked me, "What's the sluttiest thing you've ever done?" a few weeks ago. Story 32. I was at a friend's upper duplex for a party in the Dinky town area near the University of Minnesota. Everyone was getting progressively drunk. At one point, some of my friends were on the second-floor balcony chatting with a random girl who happened to walk by. She got a little upset and knocked on the duplex door. They let her in and started talking with her. When asked why she came inside, she said maybe she was looking for a little trouble. I'm usually shy, but fueled by the alcohol, I managed to sound cooler than usual. I said, "Lucky for you, my middle name is Trouble." We didn't actually do it, but we made out for quite a while. I think that line is still my smoothest to date. Story 33. I've made a few bold advances. One time, my family and I were visiting my dad's friend, and they had a son I'd always had a crush on. To keep his little brother entertained, since he was the only young kid around, we all ended up playing hide and seek. While the little brother was it, the guy I liked followed me to my hiding spot. Things got quiet for a second, and I just came out and asked if he wanted to do it. Things escalated from there, and we ended up banging the next day. Most recently, I started working at a restaurant and one coworker was super hot. I knew I had to bang him, but I started out with subtle flirting at first. One day he starts speaking Spanish with another coworker, and I felt silly because I don't speak any Spanish, took French in high school. I decided to mess with him and said, "Voulez-vous coucher avec moi?" And he immediately realized it was a centerpiece in the Lady Marmalade song. Searched it up the meaning, and then came up to me and said, "Oui." And we did it the next day. Story 34. The boldest move I ever made was technically kicked off by someone else, but I ran with it. I was at a club, completely hammered and off my head, and I'd lost all my friends, standard night out behavior for me. I tend to wander when I'm in that state. So I found a group of girls chatting and asked if I could hang with them for a bit, so I didn't look like a total loner. People at these kinds of events are usually pretty chill, 60% of the time. That tactic works every time. They were cool about it, and one of them asked if I needed a wing woman. I said sure, why not? And the next thing I know, this girl strides over and plants a kiss on me like she's checking if I've still got my tonsils. Then she walks off with her friends. I ran into her 2 or 3 more times that night, and each time I just walked up, grabbed her by the face, kissed her, and walked off like it was our thing. By the end of the night, I saw her again with her crew, gave her a hello kiss, looked her in the eyes and said, "You're coming home with me," and she did. Absolute hallelujah moment. Edit. Also, if there's one thing this thread has taught me, it's that the line between a bold, sexy, and strong approach and SA is entirely dependent on whether or not you are attractive. Story 35. About 10 years ago, I was in my mid-20s when I met this attractive older woman at a car wash. We struck up a conversation. Well, mostly she talked while I listened, as we waited for our cars. When mine was ready, I walked off and sat in my car, mentally kicking myself for not at least asking for her number. A couple minutes later, to my surprise, she walked over and handed me her card with her number on it. I ended up calling her the next night, and she talked to me for about an hour. I barely got a word in. She told me all about her house being foreclosed, the car accidents she'd been in, the surgeries she needed because of them, her dog, and so on. This went on for a few days, and every conversation felt like a repeat of the last. At first, I was excited. An attractive woman in her late 40s or early 50s had given me her number, but after a week of non-stop one-sided calls, I started sending her straight to voicemail. It was just too much, completely exhausting. She talked non-stop. A couple of weeks later, after I'd already deleted her number, she called again. I picked up, and sure enough, the same cycle kicked off. But this time, she started slipping in comments like, "I might need to borrow some money from you." Normally I stayed quiet during our calls, just letting her talk, but that pushed me over the edge. I'd had enough. So, I finally cut in and said, "How about instead of talking on the phone every night, we meet up for drinks tomorrow, then head back to my place and screw each other's brains out?" The thinking was pretty simple. I really did want to bang her but couldn't care less if she said she never wanted to speak to me again. We ended up going out for drinks, and, while we didn't do it, we went back to my place and fooled around a little bit. Story 36. A story where both her and me were very bold, and I got lucky twice. I live in an apartment building, with security, and over time I've become good friends with the guards downstairs. I often hang out in the lobby with them, shooting the breeze for hours. Stacy did the same thing. Once she realized we both liked spending time with the guards, she'd hang out there for hours too, trying to catch me either coming down to hang out or just passing through. One day I came downstairs for a smoke and walked through the lobby toward the back door. There she was, sitting with the guards, a stunning 6'3" purple-haired goddess. The moment she saw me, she smiled, and I couldn't help but smile back. As I stepped outside, the door slowly closed behind me. I knew she'd gone out the front door for her smoke when I heard one of the guards call out behind me, "What about him? He's single." She called out loud enough to pierce the glass door that had just closed behind me, loud enough so I could hear #would do. As I walked back inside, she slipped away in a cab. I quickly wrote down my number on a scrap of paper and asked the guards to pass it to her when she returned. They happily agreed, thrilled that their matchmaking plan was working. A few hours later, she came back and broke up with her girlfriend right on the front steps of the building for reasons that had nothing to do with me. That was my first bit of luck. She walked into the lobby one day, stressed and crying, and the guard pulled out my scrap of paper, smiling as he said, "He likes you." A few days later, on New Year's Eve, we got together, my second time getting lucky. We dated for 8 months, but I messed things up by not being as supportive as I should have been. Later, I realized she was the one that got away. But hey, hindsight is 20/20ths, right? I'll never stop loving that purple-haired goddess. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.